This is the On the Pony Express podcast, part of the On3 network. Check out all the SMU coverage you need at ontheponyexpress.com. Now, here's your host, Billy Embody.
1, 2, 3, let me go.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. I'm Billy Embody. Thanks for tuning in again as we continue our week of podcasts for you loyal listeners of our YouTube channel, Spotify, Apple, wherever you catch the podcast at. We appreciate you guys for following along and waiting while we got back on track. But here's 3 for 3, breaking down SMU's offense during spring ball. We'll talk about the defense on Thursday. We'll cover some recruiting on the football side of things and anything basketball that's kind of lingering over the week on Friday. But first, got to remind you guys that we are presented by our friends at StatusJet, statusjet.com. Give David Henry and his team a call. They will walk you through their process of getting you from point A to point B with that level of luxury that you expect from a private jet charter company. You can give them a call, 866-952-4659. Mention the code PonyUpACC, or that you heard about StatusJet from ontheponyexpress.com, and they will give you a discount on a round trip when you book through StatusJet. Here's the thing, guys. This is the perfect year to really dabble a little bit in the private jet space. There is opportunities to go to new places. There are, of course, your travel times of the year with summer coming up and all of those things. But with SMU's football schedule, basketball schedule, take the opportunity to start looking ahead and planning with StatusJet on those trips. I mean, just right off the bat, you could go to Reno. You can enjoy Lake Tahoe when SMU opens at Nevada. You can make a pit stop in Las Vegas and do the Strip. You can do a lot of different things with StatusJet, and they've got a full rundown already planned behind the scenes for pretty much every trip that people reach out to them for. I got sent over while I was kind of on my little bit of a baby leave, you want to call it, or whatever. They were sending me all the different, talking points on what they have planned for the different opportunities for game days, game day trips, or longer trips for SMU fans when you talk about going into ACC country. So exciting times with our friends at StatusJet. Again, reach out to them. They're proud supporters of SMU athletics, but also the On the Pony Express podcast. Let's talk about spring ball. And I got to pretty much go to every spring practice, save for a couple there at the end. And I didn't end up going to the spring game because of course, the birth of Jack. And the good thing for me is I was able to see a lot of the best on best throughout the spring. So I've got a really good idea, I feel like, of where SMU football is at leaving the spring. And there are more things to address with this team. There are holes to fill in the roster, and we'll cover those as the transfer portal window and the recruiting period all unfold. But you have a football team that I feel like is in a very good spot. And we know that overall on both sides of the ball. They have veterans. They have a lot of experience on this team. I mean, they have 22 guys entering the final year of their college eligibility as it stands right now. Who knows if they add another guy or 2 or 3 that has 1 year remaining. And if they add more into the mix, great. Those will be key pieces for them moving forward. And we'll assess the roster as guys commit and join this program. We're going to talk about the offense for today's pod. We're going to talk about defense on Thursday, and we'll clean up everything recruiting-wise on Friday in your final 5 for 5 pod of the week. And I wanted to start with the offensive side because, one, I think I want to talk about it before we see any true movement in the transfer portal. I think that's the offense is a side of the ball that, in particular, things appear to maybe have the potential to move and obviously change this spring recap and how we look at it. But what you have is a team that has talent at the skill positions and depth at the skill positions across the board, whether it be the quarterback room, the running back room, wide receiver, tight end. What the issue was, I felt like, for the spring as they went through it, was trying to find ways that Kevin Jennings and these quarterbacks could develop a little bit more because this defense got so much pressure on them, because that defensive front of Elijah Roberts and all the defensive linemen they brought in are very, very talented. And with Logan Parr and Ben Sparks out and some younger guys getting their first extended action after departures of Marcus Bryant and Brandon Hickman, this offense just kind of had its moments in spring ball where you thought, okay, SMU's defense is going to be pretty good at controlling the line of scrimmage once again. And I do think they're going to be able to do that this upcoming season. I really think that front is very impressive. Where SMU will try to dabble in the transfer portal, of course, is upgrading the offensive line room and trying to get them in a better situation overall. And we know that we'll cover that in terms of who SMU will be able to bring in when it comes to the offensive line situation and see if they bring in anyone else on top of that. But overall, let's start with the quarterback room. Preston Stone was pretty much out the entire spring. He didn't do too much. He wasn't able to really go live at any point. I don't really believe he did any live stuff outside of maybe 7-on-7 in the spring game. So he's got now the summer where he's fully cleared. He can get back into the mix, but he's going to take a second to obviously get fully back on track when it comes to the fall camp portion of the year, when he will get that chance to get back to work in the live drills. And so for Kevin Jennings, this was a really good opportunity. And I feel like with Kevin, he is somebody that is a gamer. It's kind of similar to Preston in that sense. Like, I don't think either one of them are incredible practice quarterbacks. I think what makes Kevin and Preston really good is they do have the understanding of situations, and they have the ability to find their own different ways to move this offense up and down the field. And we've seen it, for varying levels of degree last season, of success last season for both of them. Preston took his lumps kind of early in the year. There was a lot of questions around the offense coming off of that game at East Carolina. And then they really turned it on at the end of the season. And then Kevin was moving the offense up and down the field against Tulane, but they had some turnovers and they weren't able to capitalize on some of the opportunities that they had in that game to really, quite honestly, make that game just be a complete ass whipping. I mean, it was already a dominant showing by the defense, and it really wasn't as close as maybe the score suggested, but SMU's offense was moving it up and down the field. Kevin needs to continue to get better at taking care of the football. And I do feel like as he gets more experienced with the receivers and skill positions around him, maybe that comes. And you would hope, if he does see extended playing time, that he takes a little bit better care of the ball. He had the turnover in the early goings against Boston College that I thought was, unfortunately critical, and ended up being a kind of a big play in the game. But on the same token, he was able to throw down the field. I'm trying not to go back to last season, but so much of the spring, the quarterbacks were under pressure. And Kevin, I think, continued to flash his arm talent, continued to flash what makes him a promising quarterback in this system. But if you're looking for maybe the biggest winner of the spring, it's Keldrick Luster. I mean, I've seen Keldrick Luster put up 600 yards of offense from McKinney. I've seen him do it at a high level in Texas high school football. I know what he's capable of for the most part. But this spring was a great chance for him to really get extended looks as the backup. He's not going to overtake Kevin right now. I have very little doubts of that. But what he was able to show is all the different things that he can do with his skill set. Being a thick runner of the football, he has the arm talent. I mean, he really does have a strong arm. And then you have Tyler Aronson, who was learning. He was developing. He's getting his first look at college football against a team that does have a lot of talent on the defensive side. And he didn't get too much extended time during practices with the team and extended opportunities. But that's okay. That's the difference of where this position group is compared to years ago, when you're talking about, all right, one guy, got to keep them upright, and you hope that they don't get hurt. So Kevin, I think, showed why he's so talented, why they trust him. This whole offense, for the quarterbacks in particular, it was kind of tough sledding at times because this defense got so much pressure on them. I feel like sometimes when the offense had success, it was chunk plays down the field, finding different ways to create kind of movement within SMU's defense and allow them just that extra second to maybe uncork one down the field. Keldrick Luster and Kevin Jennings both had some really nice deep passes throughout spring ball, and they were able to take advantage of those at times, which, again, as we talk about the defense, corner is still a position that needs to be addressed. But still, this is a veteran wide receiver group that we'll talk about in just a second. When it comes to finding playmakers, it's very deliberate how SMU's coaching staff, I feel like, handled this spring when it came to reps for pass catchers. You look at Jake Bailey, who had a terrific spring in the slot. I think he honestly kind of created some separation there, maybe with Roderick Daniels, who I think will obviously play a lot, but he was just so consistent. He was really, really strong over the middle. He made a lot of plays overall in practice. I think he had a great spring. And unfortunately, Keyshawn Smith also had a great spring, but at the end got hurt and was held out of the spring game. He made contested catches left and right. And same goes for Jordan Hudson. I mean, both of them, I feel like, really battled and made plays that SMU needs them to make in the long run. I mean, they just have that type of talent that you want to see on the field. And as these quarterbacks continue to develop that trust with these guys, they'll be able to get more on the same page and more opportunities to make big plays, and that'll come. That'll continue to come as Preston gets back into the fold and Kevin gets more reps with them, and Keldrick. All of those guys that work with really the starting group will just continue to build on what they had last year. And so, I think with De'Aaron King and these quarterbacks, they've got to find ways to help these receivers understand somebody has to emerge as the alpha. And if you're watching on YouTube, you're going to see a rep right here. Jordan Hudson looks like the guy. He is smooth out there. He's able to create separation. And even when he doesn't, he's so competitive catching the football down the field that he gets those opportunities and he really makes the most of them. And so I think for SMU, they've got to find a receiver that becomes a number one. And if you're a betting man, it's got to be Jordan Hudson at this point. He had a terrific spring. He looked like the star that we had as a 5-star coming out of Garland High School. And I think he's going to continue to develop over the course of the summer and really put it together for SMU this year. I think he's got that it factor, and he wants to be that guy. And if he can do it, then he's going to be a real reason why SMU's offense can take a big step forward this season. If they don't get somebody to step up, it's going to be wide receiver by committee. I'm sure there's still going to be a good bit of rotation, but there's a lot of changes to this wide receiver room in terms of, I think, the expectations that Rob Likens has for the group. Because if you don't produce, I think with a guy like Jordan Hudson in there and Jake Bailey being in his final year and Roger Daniels being in his final year, they're going to lean on guys who they feel like can do it consistently. All of these players that are pretty much going to factor into the rotation, save for maybe an Ashton Cozart or Jamarian Carroll or Jackson Lavender, if they can find their way in there, all of these guys have been here a year and at least. And so if you haven't done it in the past for this coaching staff, maybe you are going to get kind of pushed aside a little bit. And it's time for somebody to break out. And if they can find a hot hand, I think maybe this is the year that Rhett and this entire coaching staff has the conversation of, all right, we've got somebody who's really making dominant plays down the field. We're seeing some flashes. Let's try to get him going, and let's try to build his confidence. Jordan Hudson wasn't ready for that last year. He could very well be ready for it this year. So give him the chance if that is the case, and let him crash or let him fly. Because if he flies, this offense is going to be pretty scary, because when you factor in the wide receivers, if you get somebody to step up, and I think Jordan Hudson was the one that really made the biggest step this spring, then you have RJ Maryland, who's such a matchup nightmare for opposing defenses to cover with a safety or cover with a linebacker. that you can then find ways to get him more open and draw up things and maybe find that in the offensive passing game a little bit more so. And RJ, I will say this, I thought he had a great spring. I thought he was smooth. I thought he caught the ball well. It just seemed so natural for him. Not that it hasn't in the past, but I just think that as he develops more confidence and really realizes how special he could be, maybe that's what it takes to kick the door down. And all of a sudden you are getting that consistent level of all-American potential type of production versus, okay, some games he's there, some games he doesn't get it, which look, we know going back for years on this type of an offense, it's kind of the case. You can get some days that the tight end can have a monster game and others when they don't. But RJ Maryland has that special talent where he could really be the guy in this passing attack and command double teams and really just create havoc for opposing defenses. And for SMU, it'd be nice to be built off of what he did in the spring and turned it up a notch. In terms of the pass catchers with the breakout players, I think the biggest breakout guy for me was Ashton Cozart. And he's got 4 years of eligibility, which is big for SMU. He redshirted coming in at Oregon, or redshirted at Oregon and then transferred to SMU with his 4 years of eligibility. He came in and I thought he was a lot more natural catching the football than even I had anticipated. I thought it was going to be a kind of a learning curve, and he wasn't perfect by any means, but he's very much a has the potential to be a guy in this offense. And so I really think we're going to see him contribute at a high level, for the most part, once we see a lot of these receivers depart. It might not be this year, but he showed enough. He showed enough in the spring ball that you feel confident about where things are trending for him long term. And then when you look at kind of a surprise player in the pass catchers, I really felt like Jamarian Carroll was awesome this spring. He made some explosive plays. And one thing is he really bulked up. I think now he looks like somebody that physically can hold up over the course of a college football season. And that wasn't the case. As much as I wanted Jamarian Carroll to be that dude right away for SMU, he needed a little bit of time. And so he took that time and he really just impressed overall in the spring. I really felt like he was natural. He looked more comfortable. Sometimes when wide receivers think, and I was talking with a prospect about this week as he was doing some drills, I was out at a training session, and he and his coach were talking, and his coach was like, look, why are you running it this way? He's like, I'm thinking. I'm not out here running my offense. I'm not going through a familiar thing for me. So I'm thinking about where my feet need to go. And I feel like that's kind of exactly what happened with Jamarian Carroll last year. And so he's going to be somebody that I think went from, okay, is this going to work? I mean, Jamarian Carroll, I remember I loved him coming out of high school, and he just showed up on campus and I was like, oh man, okay, all right. He needs to gain a ton of weight and he needs to figure it out, figure out life as a college receiver. And he really did that over the course of this past year. I got to give him a ton of credit. And him sticking around is important for SMU too, because he provides depth. He's somebody that had such a good spring that I feel like he can overtake somebody that might be in a veteran role. And instead of that player being in a cush spot, now you've got Jamarian Carroll nipping at your heels. And I feel like Jamarian has the capability of maybe playing in the slot in a pinch. You have Jake Bailey, you have Roger Daniels, but he could play the slot a little bit, but he can also be moved around really on the outside in particular and create some matchup issues. So he had a huge spring, really, really impressed by him and what he was able to do. As we look at the offense, and this is kind of the back portion of this podcast where the offensive line and the run game, there are two different points when talking about the run game in spring and the running backs overall. Yes, SMU does live tackling. Yes, they also do kind of what you call thud, wrap up and then let them go and keep them up, as the coaches say. It's hard at times to really diagnose if a run game is doing well or if a run game is going to struggle. And with this offensive line, they need Logan Parr back. They need him at left guard. He was somebody that really outperformed expectations last year and put it all together in a way that I think really helped this offensive line obviously be one of the best in the American, but just be one of the better ones in the country. I mean, they were kind of an honor. I think they were honorable mention Joe Moore Award finalists. And if you're going into next year and you look at what SMU did, bringing in Nate Anderson, bringing in Savion Byrd, you have Justin Osborne back, you have Ja'Kai Clark back. The interior is so critical, I think, to whether this team is going to be able to run the football or not. And SMU hasn't run the football consistently enough over the last 2 years, quite honestly. I mean, they just really haven't. And I think Rhett and his staff obviously want to get back to that. And they, in the ACC, I mean, they're going to need it. They're going to need to control the clock just a little bit more with their run game than they did in the American, because it's going to be an adjustment in the ACC with this just kind of meat grinder schedule. And so it's very important that you look at what happened in the spring without Logan Parr and Ben Sparks, two veterans, and you look at getting them back and you say, okay, you know the offensive line is going to be better than it was in the spring. But at the end of the day, it's also very difficult to say, okay, this run game is going to be raring to go because X, Y, and Z. Remember, I thought Jalen Knighton last year going into it was going to be this all AAC, dynamic player, which at moments he was. We saw what he could do at various moments throughout the season. And we saw what LJ Johnson could do once he was healthy at various moments. What SMU as a whole with this running back room, and it's on Kyle Cooper, the new running backs coach, to get this out of them, is they absolutely need consistency. They need the performance from Jalen Knighton that SMU got against Charlotte and North Texas and Tulane. 5 yards a carry, 5+ yards a carry. That's what they need from Jalen Knighton. That's what they need from LJ Johnson. They need those runners to be that reliable. And on top of that, you need Kamar Wheaton to emerge and be that guy as well. And if you get that, then you can really find a way for this offense to, move the football a little bit more consistently, I feel like. If you're going to be one-dimensional in the ACC, it's going to be an issue. So with the offensive line, it is a group that is incomplete in a sense, because Garen Justice, and he's fun like this. He likes to rotate and tinker and try different things out and players at different positions and all of those things. And in the spring, with the way the position is, or with the way his group was, it made a lot of sense. Again, you're missing Logan Parr. You've got Ja'Kai Clark back, who played center kind of in various moments. But what you have also is Alex Woods stepping up behind center, so much so that, and this is just my opinion, one, I don't think Garen Justice is done tinkering with his offensive line. It will also be dependent on SMU getting in the thick of it with a top transfer offensive tackle and reeling him in, which could then lead to, okay, you bring in another transfer tackle, then you have PJ Williams, Savion Byrd on top of that player, whoever it may be. Then you have offensive tackle competition that is real, because I liked what Savion Byrd and PJ Williams did at times. Granted, they are going up against Jafari Harvey, Elijah Roberts, Isaiah Smith, Cam Robertson, Omari Abor, guys that have talent and have the ability to really put pressure on the quarterback, and they're having to face waves of those guys, no matter, what string they're going against on defense. I mean, it's a formidable group to face, and they showed enough, but you need another option because unfortunately, I just don't think Caleb Johnson has gotten there yet at this stage, and Sean Scott probably needs another year to get there in reality to play at a high level of college football and face teams in the ACC. So those things will be played out in the transfer portal. I do like the athleticism and ability to move around a little bit more with Savion Byrd and PJ Williams. I think just how they bend and move, they're better than Marcus Bryant and Hiron White, who both do other things very well and who are big losses for this offensive line. Don't get me wrong, but they're just different offensive tackles that SMU has out there now in PJ Williams and Savion Byrd. So, and Savion is very much, he was adjusting this spring. He went from playing guard at Oklahoma to right tackle at SMU. There are things that are changing for him in terms of playbook, position, not only position, but side of the football that you're playing on, going from the left side to the right for the most part. So there's a lot of change there for him. So with that change, now is the time where they can really work on their own and work on his sets and work on his positioning so that in fall camp, he really is that guy who can lock it down. Because if they do, in fact, bring in a top-level transfer offensive tackle, which they're aiming for, then that competition is even better, makes the whole team better, and it really solidifies the edges and will allow the quarterbacks more time and all of those things. Where I think Garen Justice is not done is this program is usually really good about wanting to develop players and give them opportunities to then show what they've learned, show what they've put together. And while you have a veteran bunch of offensive linemen and you have multiple players who have now started, in some cases, multiple years for SMU, you have a young, budding, in my opinion, future star on the offensive line in Alex Woods. I loved what he brought to the table in spring. And if he can play center and Justin Osborne can play right guard, and then Ja'Kai Clark spells him and Ja'Kai Clark spells Logan Parr, all of a sudden your depth at offensive line is completely different. And that's not to mention you have Ben Sparks and Nate Anderson there who can spell as well. The offensive line is an interesting group. By my count right now, 13 offensive linemen, just a touch light than normal for this group. And that's what happens when you lose, two veterans in Marcus Bryant and Branson Hickman and Hiron White. And you're going through a touch of a change, but you have a group in terms of the veterans that you feel good enough about to like your starting five. But at the end of the day, SMU needs to improve this group as a whole. And I think while it's hard to tell in spring ball, when you get Logan Parr and when you get maybe another offensive tackle in and you get Ben Sparks back, then you'll see improvements in the run game. You'll see improvements in SMU's offensive line as a whole. It's just really hard to diagnose that as of now. And I want to end on the running backs because I do like what they bring to the table as a group. But where SMU's missing is consistency. And we saw it with Kamar Wheaton breaking a big run, but fumbling in the spring game. We know Jalen Knighton struggled with fumbles at times. We know LJ Johnson's been nicked up. But they bring in Brashard Smith, and they're going to bring in Derek McFall this summer. They really need Brashard Smith to be that explosive quick hitter that, again, I feel like we talked about this before last season. We were thinking, okay, Jalen Knighton's going to be the guy. And unfortunately, he wasn't consistent enough to break the big plays. And so I think he's got to find a way to do that. Somebody has to find a way to do that in this running back room I will say, I think the pass catching nature of this running back group has the potential to be pretty special. All the guys can catch the football for the most part. I would say Brashard Smith and Jalen Knighton are your two really solid pass catchers, of course, but they just have that ability and speed to really make big plays in the passing game. And SMU's drilled it in the quarterback's head enough where they can get those guys to check it down, to hit the flat, all of those things. So, like the running back room, it's just I would say after losing Tyler Levine, you now look at it as more of a question / concern because they return so many of the same guys, but they haven't gotten that consistent production out of them yet. Kyle Cooper can do that. It might be one of those big things for this offense. That's really what I feel like this offense has been missing at times is the consistency at the running back position. So that's something that you leave spring unanswered because it is really hard to see who's really going to be able to be this available, consistent, dependable running back for SMU because of just kind of the way they practice. And it's the same thing around all of college football. But the good thing is everybody was healthy throughout spring. I thought Kamar really showed his stuff, looked stronger, bigger, all those things, which is important for him as he goes into, his second to last season of college football. And, getting these guys, all four of them, to game day will be important, of course, for Kyle Cooper. If they can have them all available, if they can find a way to not catch the injury bug or just all the different things that happened last year to the running back room, maybe they can build some rapport in this offense and some consistency and then be able to, step up and be those reliable pieces for this offense. So that is pretty much it on the offensive side of things. I guess I'll mention they didn't really work much special teams in spring, quite honestly. And if they did, I quite frankly didn't see much of it. So you have a veteran kicker in Colin Rogers. You hope that he can build off of some of the good things he did last year. He also had some issues. So building on that consistency, improving your consistency would be big for him. They'll have a new punter in Isaac Pearson. Again, didn't see much of him. They'll have Will Benton back as the long snapper. And they'll have Roderick Daniels back as your punt returner in all likelihood. And then Brashard Smith will be the kick returner without a doubt. So offensively, kind of button this up, close it up. Offensively, SMU has a group that if development and getting better is something that happens, they have a chance to be a good ACC offense, regardless of if it's Preston Stone or Kevin Jennings taking snaps for whatever reason. But there are questions on this group. There's questions at receiver. Who is going to be the guy that steps up and becomes a number one? Because I think last year showed they needed one. They needed a guy that they could go to and be like, that's our man. We're going to go to him on third and long here and try to draw pass interference. And by golly, it's going to work. That's what Jordan Hudson in theory could bring. That's what some of these guys do have the potential to bring. They just haven't shown it enough. Can the run game be consistent? Will the offensive line on the edges be okay with the two new starting tackles? And will they address that position and how much better will it get when they do? All of these things are valid questions. All of these things can't really be answered until the fall, but we'll be watching them really closely as they go through fall camp. You have two quarterbacks that have played a lot of football who are going to be the ones taking the snaps, and that's important. And so as long as you're riding with one of those two guys, I think they'll have a chance to be able to move the football when they need to at times against, Florida State's going to be tough. Louisville's going to be tough, but against the other teams, that's what makes SMU a dark horse candidate to be in Charlotte. And remember, we've had other people on that have mentioned that, but when you have experience at the quarterback position returning, it's important for your entire team and their chances to be successful. And SMU has that, which people have to remember as they look at this offense as a whole. You do have so many pieces back. You have a lot of players who are experienced in this system. It's about adding the right pieces for the future to make sure that they can take advantage of the opportunities that they have this season. So it's going to be a long summer talking about it, but SMU football, their offense with Rhett Lashley, it's always going to be an area of focus. He's the head coach. The buck stops with him, the play caller. And I'm intrigued to see what wrinkles he throws into it and what talent they bring into this offense for the 2024 season. But spring, we learned what we could learn for the most part about this offense. They had a tough time facing that SMU defense under Scott Simons, but they did show some flashes as well of what could be in 2024. But they also gave themselves lots to work on as well. So with that, guys, hope you guys enjoyed this offensive edition of the On the Pony Express podcast recapping spring ball. Quick reminder, guys, reach out to our friends at statusjet.com. Mention code PonyUpACC for a discount on a round-trip flight. Book through StatusJet or mention ontheponyexpress.com. And we will keep you guys informed on everything going on with the transfer portal. Subscribe to On the Pony Express for just $1 for 2 months using code SMU1. And with that, we'll catch you tomorrow when we talk about the defensive side of the ball and what we learned about them in spring ball. So hope you guys enjoyed this podcast, and we're now 3 for 3 on the week. So we'll catch you guys on Thursday with another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. I'm Billy Embody. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the On the Pony Express podcast with Billy Embody.
Follow us on your socials on X at SMU on3 and on Instagram at on3SMU.
And keep it locked to ontheponyexpress.com for more coverage.